It's Thursday, October 15th, and this is your Day Starter. During this month in our worship series, we've been talking about the concept of reframing. And for the most part, we've focused on the concept of gaining another's perspective. Last week it was reframing to God's perspective on the world. This week we're going to be talking about the idea of reframing to another person's perspective as we look at the story that Luke records from Jesus, known as the lost son, or more famously as the prodigal son. But there's another way to consider reframing, and that's about reframing our perspective on the world. Now, we alluded to this in the first message of this series, and if you haven't seen it, and I invite you to go back and watch it, there I talked about in broad strokes about letting go of your frame of reference so you can adopt another. But I want to get more into that as we reflect today. Sometimes the world puts us in a position where reframing is the only alternative. Consequences and activities and events outside of our control can either force us to see the world in a continuing negative spiral that just overwhelms us, or we can step out of our frame of reference and try and see if there's another perspective through which we can see all of the challenges we're facing. Of course, in my mind are the challenges we've been facing with the coronavirus pandemic and the economic consequences of that, and all the things that have been happening in our culture of late. It certainly has been a lot of hard, challenging trials. No one's trying to pretend it hasn't been. But it also offers an opportunity to do some reframing, to maybe see the world in a different way and to find new possibilities as some of the things that we have been used to in our lives have been closed down. Let me give you an example. One of the things we've grieved and struggled with as a congregation has been, for over 6 months now, the loss of in-person worship. And that's been a challenge for all of us. We've learned to adapt, to get into virtual worship and other things. But it's also been a chance to reframe. We have, as a congregation, always offered the opportunity of small group or seasonal studies, core group living. But in this season, when one thing was taken from us, a lot of you have reframed and said, well, I'm going to engage in something else. And we have the highest engagement of people in our core groups that we've ever had in my short tenure here and in the memory of some people who've been around a lot longer than I. A lot of you have reframed and said, well, if one thing is lost, there's the opportunity for something else. As we continue to face a season of pandemic, economic challenges, and bitter political divides that would lead us toward negative, almost giving up kind of thoughts, I invite you to think about how you can reframe your perspective and see new possibilities. And one other thing, I invite you as well to read before Sunday's worship the story of the lost son, Luke's 15th chapter. And watch each of the characters in that story and see if you can identify which one, in the midst of turmoil, was able to reframe their perspective. It seems that God values this capacity as well. Something to consider.